John, our special guest this week is the owner of the New York Mets, Steve Cohen.
Yes, very interested to hear what he has to say. I will touch on all the different subjects that everyone wants to hear about. Certainly Diaz, Alonso, the Correa negotiations, how he feels about the team now. And, he's a great guest and really looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
Yep, we'll talk to Steve Cohen about all that. John and I are going to talk about one of their top prospects, Brett Baty. Does he make the team? We're going to talk about one of the Yankees' top prospects, Anthony Volpe. Does he make the Yankees? We'll discuss the WBC. John was at the event, and we'll do more if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. John, you were at the WBC final, which to me, I think had the greatest end game since Bob Welch versus Reggie Jackson. Bigger than that worldwide, right? And the same result where the pitcher strikes out the hitter, Shohei Otani, Mike Trout. What'd you think of last night when we're talking, and what'd you think of this tournament?
Yeah, I mean, what are the chances it came down to that? A one-run game, thanks to the Schwarber home run. Trout at bat, greatest hitter over the last quarter century against Ohtani. Marvel, really going to be one of the greatest players of all time. And, he really rose to the occasion. That slider was absolutely unhittable. Fastball at 100 miles an hour coming in as a closer. I wonder what the Angels think about that. They need him ramped up and throwing several innings. Darvish did the same, but it was a thrilling World Baseball Classic. I never thought that the WBC would get to that. There was one point where only John Morosi seemed to be interested in it, nobody else. And now you've got 48 million viewers for Team Italy against Japan, which is, not a close competition. And I think you had more for that last night had the game been on later in Japan. But it was a perfect ending to a great WBC.
I left the tournament thinking two things in particular. Can you imagine having Ohtani and Trout not being able to make the playoffs?
It's amazing.
I mean, it's amazing how great they are. And then I do think we can definitively, because it's not a one-shot deal, I think Shohei Otani is the most talented player who's ever played baseball.
Probably so. I mean, he is one of the 10 best pitchers in the game, and he is one of the 10 best sluggers. I mean, you weren't there for this, but the batting practice, and I had a lot of games at Marlins Park. It was incredible. I have never seen anything like it. And I asked Marlins people, it looked like there were golf balls shooting out to the back wall there. I mean, he was hitting it, seemed like 50 feet farther than anybody else has ever hit in batting practice. And he doesn't normally take batting practice on the field, but he wanted to send a message. I don't know if he needed to send a message, but he did send a message.
Definitively. And I think the WBC sent a message. It was, for oftentimes to get national interest in baseball, we end up talking about steroids or brawls or controversy. People were talking about the games that were being played. And it probably sounds ridiculous because we're older folks and we kind of like baseball, but it felt like baseball was cool there for a while. Like we were at the center of the conversation for what was going on about how talented and passionate the players were.
Right. And baseball's on a roll right now. I mean, that pitch clock has been fantastic. I know there have been some complaints about it from some of the players. I don't think all, but look, the minor leaguers adjusted. Obviously we have a horse in this race. We want it to be good for the deadlines, but beyond that, to cut the fat out of the game, I think you and I both agree on that. Something we absolutely agree on. It's been great for the sport. Now, in this case, where these games were huge and everybody was riveted, it was okay that the games were 3 hours or in one case 4 hours. But, regular season games at 2.5 hours, that's enough time. So I doubt baseball will do anything significant there. They'll listen. But I think baseball's really on a hot streak right now.
Yeah, the WBC, the pitch clock, it reminds me that I should tell us we're having a special pre-opening day live taping of the show next Tuesday, which is March 28th at 6 p.m. at the Ainsworth, which is in Midtown, 33 East 45th Street. And our special guest, John, that day is the Commissioner of Baseball, Rob Manfred. We're going to be starting at 6 p.m. If you want to get there a little earlier, that's when the questions will start. you get there a little earlier. John and I will juggle. We'll do some other things to entertain you, but certainly join us if you can. Go to the New York Post online. I'm sure you'll find a way to get tickets for that. John, the storyline, one of the big storylines as we complete, you and I are talking with about a week to go until opening day. So teams have to do their final roster, and it's getting really interesting. Brett Baty still in camp with the Mets. Anthony Volpe is still in camp with the Yankees. Why don't we start with the Yankees? Is Anthony Volpe going to make the Yankees?
Well, I was there for more than a week, and I think he should. It's easy for me to say. I mean, he's not my prospect. I know the Yankees are perceived as conservative. It feels like there are people above who want him on the team. It feels like, and again, nobody's saying anything because they don't want to take sides in this race. And obviously, Peraza did a nice job for the month that he played last year. It feels like the clubhouse believes that Volpe should be on the team. Great kid. Jersey boy. I think he'll be good with the bigger bags and the fewer throwovers. I think he can steal bases. He can certainly hit. I think he can play shortstop. He's certainly great at second, and he looks like a major leaguer to me. So I'd like to see him on that team.
It's a tough numbers game if they're not able to trade. It's really a Torres thing. Kind of Filip is a backup player now. He's the 26th player. The question is about Torres. And if Torres is on the roster, it feels like they could only take Peraza or Volpe. And I'm now starting to wonder, at the beginning of spring training, I just assumed if only one was going to make it, it was going to be Peraza as the starting shortstop.
Yeah.
I think it's conceivable now that Volpe is the starting shortstop, and then they'll work through the season. And I think at some point Peraza will get up. But if this was really a try to win a job, prove you belong, prove your skills translate to the major league level, to your point, John, it feels like he's done that, and he is their top prospect.
Yeah, I mean, they said it was a derby. He's clearly winning the derby. I mean, we still got a week to go, as you said, but I mean, I was there fairly recently. I know you've been there a lot. To me, it feels like he's won the job.
Yeah, I'm going back. I'm in Met camp now. I'm going back there for the end. I'm going to be there when the decision's made, but I am in Met camp. And look, as I'm speaking to you this morning, their top prospect, the Mets, Francisco Alvarez, was sent to the minor leagues. There was some question, could he make it maybe DH catcher? He didn't. He had some troubles at the plate. The Mets say they're very happy with him as a catcher. He'll go down, first injury, I'm sure he'll be brought back up. But the guy who's still in camp is Brett Baty. Our colleague Mike Puma wrote about this a few days ago, that maybe he went from the outside to the inside. What do you think?
Yeah, I still don't think Beatty's going to make the team. I think they want him to play every day as a third baseman. It's tough to do that with the Mets. I could see a lane where he's the DH, but really with Vogelbach there and also left-handed, it's really not there for him. I mean, to me, Escobar is the third baseman. So I'm not sure how they would work it with Beatty on the team, and he needs to be playing third base because he's their third baseman of the future. And so I think it's a long shot that Beatty makes the team. I know the fans are going to be saying, make him the DH. He's going to hit more than Vogelbach and certainly Ruff. I get that. But if he's the DH, he's not learning third base. So I'm still thinking that's not going to happen. But it's still up for debate. He's still there, and he's had a big spring.
Yeah. John, I'll be surprised if the Mets open the season in Miami and Milwaukee. I'll be surprised if we get to opening day and Darren Ruff is on the roster. I could imagine that he might make the team out of spring training, but I think that they probably internally know that was a mistake. He may be shaken up about playing here. And there probably is a way at that point to just decide that you can make Beatty the third baseman against all right-hand pitching, at least, make Escobar the right-handed DH, and both guys get plenty of at-bats that way. I think there's an avenue for it. I think that Beatty, like Volpe, has answered a lot of questions here. And I think if I was playing the 50-50 game, I'm not 75 or 90%. Can I be 52% that I think he's got a real shot now?
Well, I think he's going to play a significant role at some point this year. It just at the very beginning, the opening day, which is kind of what we're talking about, still tough for me to see it because they want him to be playing third base, and they have a third baseman. It's a little different when you have a guy on $10 million contract like Escobar. Peraza does not have a $10 million contract. I think Volpe, to me, has a clearer lane at the moment. But I do agree that Beatty's should get significant at-bats at some point this year, and I could see certainly Ruff going and Beatty getting at-bats in some way that you kind of devised there. But again, at the beginning, I think they want to play third base.
Yeah, well, it will be interesting to see what happens. There's obviously a lot of Met questions. And who's a better guest to talk about with a lot of Met questions than the owner, Steve Cohen, who joins us next on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. Back on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman, and we have a repeat guest that we're thrilled to have. It's the owner of the New York Mets, Steve Cohen. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. You're joining us from your office in Stamford. We appreciate that.
Sure.
So just the first thing that comes to my mind is the WBC. I think everyone would generally think that this was a very, very successful tournament for the sport writ large. But for two teams, there was unfortunate results, right? The Astros lost perhaps the best leadoff hitter in the sport in Jose Altuve to an injury, and the Mets lost probably the best relief pitcher in the sport, Edwin Diaz. And I just wonder what it makes you think about the event.
Well, I thought the event was incredible. I mean, when you look at the quality of the games and the excitement, I mean, I just thought it was an incredible an event thrown by MLB, and yeah, it's unfortunate what happened to Edwin and then Altuve too. I mean, I guess that's what's going to happen when you play baseball. People do get injured. Either, Edwin's injury obviously incredibly freakish, and I mean, you could argue you could hold it after the season as opposed to in front of the season. I mean, I'm sure there'll be tweaks and stuff like that, but from a standpoint of what's best for baseball and the amount of viewership and excitement around it, I mean, you couldn't have scripted it any better. And I think from a long-term perspective, it's phenomenal for baseball.
Steve, I want to follow up on that. I'm not sure if you were watching at the time, but what was your reaction if you were watching or if you just heard it when you saw that Diaz went down? And is there any chance that he could come back this year? They said 8 months, which it doesn't sound good. It sounds like through October, which is just as bad as it could be. But just wanted to see if there was any chance there. And also, I know you had insurance, or I think you had insurance, as well as the WBC insurance, which you're paying premiums on. So do you get the insurance money from both places? And does this in any way help your luxury tax? Do they deduct the $18.5 million salary of Diaz from your payroll in terms of the luxury tax?
There's a sixth question.
Yeah.
Well, I know you're a smart guy and you can remember.
Sorry, I couldn't write them down. I got to how many questions you just asked. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're going to get insurance back. It's we had our own insurance policy. MLB had their policy covering the players. And essentially they're not. I don't get paid twice, but we will get a significant part of Edwin's salary for next year for back. So that's obviously that's a consolation prize from obviously a horrific injury to Edwin and obviously listen, it's hard to replace a guy like that, but that's the way sports is and baseball is. You're going to have injuries, don't know when. And listen, I think we've built a lot of depth in this team, and so it's the old next man up kind of attitude. As far as him coming back, it's probably 8 months. There are examples where they've come back. Athletes with this type of injury have come back 6 months, and so we'll have to see, right? I mean, it's too early to tell. And but if he comes back, he's coming back very late in the season, if at all.
Yeah, let's see if I could limit this to one question. I'll let John ask the multi-pronged ones. what I would ask is, just because we mentioned the insurance, you mentioned next man up. One of the stories of the offseason is obviously where you took your payroll for 2023. It's a record.
Yeah.
I wonder how comfortable you are with that, and if you think you've made the sport uncomfortable with where you've taken it. Actually, that was two, now that I think of it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see this as going to be a test of my memory, questioning. Yeah, listen, I mean, I knew that, given the state of the Mets farm system, that I was going to have to bridge, to get to the point where actually some of our young players would actually start to impact the team. And it was hard. There was no way to know that it would go as high as it did. I think some of it had to do with the amount of inflation that we saw in the deals. I mean, I think the deals were up significantly versus last year or the year before. And so, that was a little bit of a surprise. I mean, I expected inflation, but actually see it in the numbers is always shocking. And so obviously I had to go further than I wanted to go, but I mean, I was going to put a team on the field that, was going to be, really competitive, and that was the goal. And so, yeah, listen, I'm following the rules in baseball. I think I've said that before. They laid out the rules. I'm following them. But ultimately, and I keep stating this over and over again, that, one of the markers of success isn't, one is obviously going to be win a World Series, but another marker will be, develop a farm system that is sustainable. We're producing great players, and that'll be another mark of success for me over the long term. And if we do that, then, you would expect our payroll to come down over time.
By our estimates, I'm not sure what your estimates are. You're at $364 million payroll, which is about $64 million more than last year and more than the record. I think the Dodgers were also around $300 million last year. How comfortable are you going to be going forward in terms of the deadline, increasing that payroll? It felt like even with that 90% tax, you were unfazed. As we all know, you had a deal for Correa, and we're going to move it even higher. So I don't like to assume, but I'm going to assume you're still willing to go higher than where you are now. And I mean, to me, it doesn't seem like are you phased at all by this 90%? Most people don't like to pay tax, but 90% is pretty high. Does it concern you at all?
Yeah, listen, nobody wants to. Every dollar I spend is going to be two, and everybody has their limits. Saying that, if we get to the deadline and we're right in there, obviously we're getting a rebate on Edwin's salary for the year, so that should help, and so that gives us a little bit more room to play around.
Steve, one of the things we haven't seen is look, if you're going to have this kind of payroll, I'm assuming you're going to hold people accountable to having this kind of payroll. What happens in Steve Cohen world when Steve Cohen gets mad within the baseball world, if his team isn't performing to the dollars?
Well, I mean, it really depends on why we're not performing. If we're not performing because we have injuries, obviously that, the day after Edwin's injury, it looked like Nimmo got hurt really bad. And so turned out not to be the case. So you just never know. And, but, I'm getting more seasoned as an owner. And I think there's always dispersion in results year to year. I mean, last year we had 101 wins, and, you just can't count on everything going right every year. Saying that, we have a very strong roster. And the other thing I'm counting on is some of our young players that are pretty much on the cusp. I suspect as the year goes on, we're going to start seeing those players come up and play a significant role in the team. And we'll see what happens. I mean, I always say it's so hard to predict the future, right? So we'll just have to let it play out. And listen, am I going to get mad? there's so many things that can happen in this sport that I'm usually pretty cool. So we'll see.
You know, I was up at the owners meeting a month ago, and you were there as well, obviously. You know, I heard from some of the other owners that there were owners supposedly mad at you for spending so much in their mind. Yet when I talked to them, all they said to me was they repeated what you had said earlier, which is that you're playing within the rules and that they were impressed that you showed up. Was there any hesitation to go? Did you find any backlash at all? And do you concern yourself at all with what the other owners think? There, I held it to 3 questions.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there were a couple free meals I was getting there, so I figured I was able to save money from going out to a restaurant. But listen, I mean, it's the I'm developing good relationships with the owners, and my attitude on that, we don't have to agree on everything. I'm not going to agree with them on some things. They're not going to agree with me on other things, and but it doesn't mean that we can't sit in a room together or have a meal together and enjoy each other's company and get to know each other and understand each other. And so, yeah, that's the way it felt when I was there. I don't know why anybody didn't think I would show up, right? I mean, I'm comfortable doing what I'm doing. And actually, the response from the owners was genuinely pretty good. I had some funny responses from different owners. I had one owner come up to me and say, I really love what you're doing. It was a small market owner. And I said, really? I go, tell me why. He goes, what you're doing, what the large market clubs did to the small market clubs, you're doing to the large market clubs. And I thought,
that's good.
And I thought that was funny, So, I mean, it's that, there is a camaraderie there and a lot of good people. So, I had a good time. It was enjoyable.
Steve, you talked about some of your prospects potentially coming through this year and having impact. I wonder, for a person who clearly has shown what he's willing to do with the payroll and what he's willing to do in understanding star power and what that means to your franchise, do you think you have the kind of willpower, like it's going to be Ohtani this offseason, it's going to be Soto the offseason after that, to resist? Or do you you got a beautiful piece of art behind you? Do you like the beautiful pieces of art? And this is the way the Mets are going to operate each offseason?
Well, like I said, it's really hard to predict the future. I'm focused on this year, and there's a lot to think about. And the season's about to start, and always optimistic at the beginning of the season. And I'm not going to worry about next year or the following year, and obviously take the recommendations of my baseball people. I allow them to. I'm not interfering. They make recommendations. I ask good questions, and whatever decisions we make. And right now I'm focused on 23, and I don't find it particularly productive to look out too much further.
My 2 cents, and that's all I have in my account, is sign Ohtani and then sign Soto.
That is not true.
$2. I think that Ohtani and Soto will look good in a Mets uniform. But let's talk about this year. What are your expectations? Have they changed with Diaz going down at all? Or you still have big expectations for the Mets this year? And I think I heard you say the one thing you regret is maybe saying we're on a 5-year plan. We should win the World Series within 5. We hope to win the World Series within 5 years. Do you still have that aspiration? And this year is really my question. What do you think?
Well, the way I describe it is, people come up to me and go, do you feel a lot of pressure, because you made that statement that, 3 to 5 years. And, it was my first press conference. And I think I joked with somebody else. I'd like to have, I thought the press conference went really well, but I'd like to have that one back.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you start to realize, so many things can happen. And a lot of great clubs that won year after year their division, but didn't win a World Series. So as quickly as you could imagine. So, you need a little luck. You need your people to be healthy. And then things fall your way. But I'm going to divulge something I really, where I really feel like I'm under a lot of pressure. and I'm only going to divulge it to you guys, is that I know you guys are really anticipating what I'm going to say. My father-in-law, my father-in-law is 92 years old. My wife has told me I got to win a World Series. He's in great shape, so I figure I got more time, but he's still 92. Okay, so and I'm joking about that, but I mean, when it happens, if it happens, that'll be great. The only thing you can do is really put yourself, in position where you're in the playoffs, team is healthy, and then you let the things fall where they may. And whenever it happens, it happens. And all you can do is just give yourself as many chances on a year in, year out basis.
Steve, you talked earlier about your learning curve, that you've been learning how to do this job. Obviously, we're talking to you from your office in Stamford. You have a pretty important day job that I'm sure occupies a lot of your time. I think your fan base is interested. What is a baseball day like? Is there such a thing as a typical baseball day? What do you dedicate to it? What interests you the most? Where do you apply yourself and your brain to running the Mets on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time, obviously doing my job during the day, but there are lulls in the day. Like you get into the middle of the day. Like today, the Federal Reserve is going to decide their interest rate policy at 2:00. Well, it's gotten really quiet in the market, so I can do this podcast. I might, okay, and I might lob in some call to Billy Eppler, just my GM, just to poke his brain on something or something I've thought of. And then from the business side, I'm always talking to my revenue people, my marketing people. I get a lot of enjoyment out of the marketing side because I'll call my marketing guy. I got a really dumb idea. Like really dumb, and he'll go, okay, well they're not always so dumb. And so the other day I called him when he goes, that's the best idea you've had yet. And so we're now trying to think it out and execute. I'm not going to divulge what it is. And yeah, so I mean, this is kind of fun. It's all fun, and it taps into my creative side. But the reality is that I still got a day job, and I'm the CEO of a hedge fund running $28 billion. And so now the good part is my kids are grown and they're out of the house. So if I had my kids around, it would be really difficult to do everything. But they're much older now, so I have more time, and so I have the ability. And baseball tends to happen after the market closes, if they're playing. And so it kind of dovetails well one with the other.
I think I have a more specific question pertaining to what's going on with the team right now. And I don't know if you read the post, I think it was yesterday, I suggested that you go out and get Edwin's brother, Alexis Diaz, who's a really good pitcher with the Reds, who probably aren't going anywhere this year. I think Joel and I probably don't agree on this, and I don't think your front office sees it my way either. My fear would be to waste that $364 million team, and it is a really good team, by not having that closer situation solidified. I'd rather give up a prospect. I understand that your team wants to be more protective of the prospects than it was previously. I mean, is there any consideration of going out and get somebody? But I mean, I think Alexis Diaz would be such a great story, and he did limit batters to 131 batting average last year, so he would be a great. I know there aren't a lot of trades this time of year, but that's one I'd love to see happen. I guess you're protective of the prospects, though.
Well,
to answer,
we don't want to disappoint you, John. And when you get into a situation like this, I think it's I think you stay calm. You don't overreact. I think if you do, I think you have a tendency to make mistakes or overpay for somebody. I mean, we're going to assess the people we have. We have some reasonably good depth, and my guess is we're going to get into the season, see what's going on, and then make decisions at some point. I mean, listen, it's a long season, and opportunities come up along the way, and I think that's how we're going to approach it. So, if we need to fill a hole, we'll fill it. But I don't see a need to overreact.
Yeah, you notice John only asked one question when he was auditioning for assistant GM there. You know, that was that was an interesting moment. Steve,
That might have been an anomaly.
yes.
It was fair.
Don't use big words with John like anomaly either. Anyway, you were recently in Japan during the WBC, and I wonder, do you find so you went there? I'm assuming it has something to do with your day job. Are you able to do Met business now when you travel someplace like that? Are you trying to open up a marketplace both for business and for players for yourself when you're over there?
Well, I had an offsite for my Asian and investing personnel in Kyoto. And so I combined it with a father-daughter trip, invited, two of my daughters, and they came to Tokyo and Kyoto. And so, I mean, I'm there. I mean, it was for business. I was able to go to a game, and I had never seen a game in Japan. And it was really fun to be in Tokyo Dome and listening to the fans and the excitement and so I saw a really good game too. So was no intent to mix Mets and it was really there for my kids and my hedge fund. And so but listen, Japan is just a phenomenal place. I just love. I've been there before, and the cities work, right? I mean, the traffic works. I mean, the food's great, and the culture is so fascinating. And so it was a great trip.
I'm with you on Japan. I've got the question that all Mets fans are really interested in, and that is about Pete Alonso. I think your front office has done a good job. We talked about inflation. Your deals, while not bargains, seem rather logical or even reasonable. Recently for Nimmo, for Verlander, all the big deals that you made. Quintana, unfortunately, hurt now. Pete Alonso, you got McNeil done. You got Lindor done, which actually looks like a pretty good deal now. It looked a little high at the moment, but looks like you were thinking along the right lines there. Is Alonso not getting done? Is he not signed because of all of the inflation out there and the tax that you guys would have to pay? Or is he rethinking it? Is he saying to himself, look at all these deals? He led the league in RBIs. He's a fantastic slugger and, obviously a terrific all-around guy and player. Why hasn't that deal happened?
Yeah, listen, Pete's a great guy and a great Met and really important to the team. And, I mean, generally we don't comment on these type of conversations. And, if there's a deal to be made, it'll be made at the right time. And, I'll rely on my baseball people to make those recommendations.
You mentioned
Have you tried? I should ask you, follow up. Did you try? Did you make an offer to him at some point?
Well, I mean, at the right time, we'll, have those conversations, and we're talking in general, but it comes down to at the right time, we'll probably sit down and have those conversations.
You mentioned your baseball people. John mentioned the deals you got done this off season. Billy Eppler's now been on the job for over a year. You mentioned talking to him. How do you assess he's done, and how do you go through an assessment besides wins and losses to determine if your head of baseball operations is doing a good job?
Listen, I mean, when you have a head of baseball, at least the way I look at it is this is a longer term evaluation, right? I mean, Billy just got in a year ago. We're trying to build a farm system. We're trying to build the processes within the farm system so that we can have sustainable success. And that takes time. You got to get the right people in, you got the right technology, right people in place. And I actually think we're making significant progress. So, results will come from good processes and, good selection of personnel So that evaluation happens over time. But Billy and I have a great relationship. I speak to him almost every day. I love the fact that, when I ask a question, he gives me a really informed answer. He keeps me in the loop, he's open to my ideas. He's very creative himself. It's really been a really good working relationship.
I think the Mets did a lot of great things this winter, and I want to ask you about the one great thing that they almost did, which is Carlos Correa. It was fascinating how that deal went down. It seemed like it went down with you and Scott Boras doing the deal. You were in Hawaii at the time and did it rather quickly.
Yeah.
And
the thing I never understood is, how did you find out so quickly? I was like, the deal was done within and then I got a call from you within 5 minutes. Was that a world record?
No, I doubt that. I'm sure that Joel's probably beaten that record, but
especially for you in the middle of the night. How did that?
Well, it was still like 5 minutes. I was,
were you dreaming? Were you dreaming this?
This is by the way, this is the scary part of the podcast where we realize you're asking better questions than us, Steve.
That's not good.
That's not really good for our reputation.
All of a sudden, the tables are turned.
Yes.
I was anticipating, but now I'm disappointed to know that I let 5 minutes
talk about
lapse.
predicting the future. It was remarkable how you were able to figure that out.
It was anticipation. Anyway, it seemed like a very interesting and quick negotiation. And, are you disappointed in the end result? And, a lot of people I see on Twitter saying, that your relationship with Scott Boras might be affected. And obviously this is important because he still has a lot of big clients. So wondering if you could address all those issues.
Yeah. How many questions were there?
Yeah.
I think there are only 3. I limited it to 3, but I noticed Joel asks multiple questions as well. And
yeah.
Oh, boy.
But the questions don't have opinions in them, and I get to the point. So
yeah. Okay. So listen, I have a good relationship with Scott, and obviously, he was doing what's best for his client, listen, we did our best to try to figure out a way to make it work, and I just personally came to the conclusion I couldn't make it work. And I as a hedge fund manager, I manage risk, and I just felt in this case, when you're dealing with unquantifiable risk, and listen, I fully expect Carlos to have a phenomenal season this season, and I hope he does. And but I just decided, based on doing my work, that this was a risk I didn't feel like taking, and that was my personal decision. And so, and listen, I could easily be proved wrong, and I hope he has a great career. But that was the decision I made.
He ended up getting a shorter deal, the $200 million for 6 years. Was that a lot of people were suggesting, well, why didn't the Mets just match that? That's certainly a lot fewer years and less dollars. Would that have been a tax issue at that point, though, at $34 million a year instead of the original $25 million? Was that the issue with the 6 for 200, or did they not even come back at that?
Well, I think there were a number of issues, and obviously, I talked about the potential risk I might be taking. Obviously, that would have been a shorter-term contract, but done in perhaps a different way from an AAV than we were originally thinking about. So, and then it really came down to we made him an offer, someone made him a better offer, and then that's where it ended. And listen, I hope he has a phenomenal year and a phenomenal career. He's a good guy.
Steve, to wrap this up, I wonder, from hearing your questions to John, maybe we've just blown this. Maybe what would Steve Cohen ask Steve Cohen right now to wrap it up? What are we missing about you or your team this year, or what's on the docket?
I don't know. What would you ask me? I think that sort of how I've evolved as an owner from year one to where I am.
Go for it. I'd love to know. How have you evolved as an owner since year one?
Listen, I think, I think I'm getting much more knowledgeable. maybe understanding, there's a certain amount of luck, certain amount of things happen with Edwin Diaz, right? I mean, injuries can play a part. Sometimes things don't always go the way you want it to go. But I don't think my overall view being very fan centric, trying to engage the fans, trying to think about new ways to make going to the ballpark exciting, fun. I'm a creative, progressive thinker, and hopefully I can impart some of that on sort of the baseball ecosystem. And so if some people believe the owners are a little upset with me from a payroll point of view, I take a different point of view and say, this is a long-term commitment on my part, and be evaluated over long term as far as what I can contribute to the sport.
Well, Steve, we appreciate you joining us. We've learned a lot. You probably asked better questions than me and John. That's embarrassing. We know.
Sure. The problem is I answered my questions.
Yes. And John didn't really answer yours. So when you have your podcast, I can't wait for one or both of us to be a guest.
You know what they call that? Return serve.
Yes. And we've also learned that your 5-year plan has become the Win It for Ralph, right? Your father-in-law. So,
absolutely.
So, Steve, we really do. We know that your day job is busy, and we do appreciate you joining us. And we hope you have a great, successful season. Thanks a lot.
Guys,
thanks, Steve.
I'll see you guys soon.
John, time for hit or error. Which one you got this week?
Well, I think the WBC was the big hit. So I got to give it a hit. I do have a couple of quibbles, and one of them is about our starting pitching. I give credit to all the guys who did show, particularly Wainwright, who ramped it up to 89 miles an hour and got out of a bases loaded, nobody out jam in the first inning and helped us get through that semifinal round. But I'd like to see the United States get more pitchers to the next one, to 2026. And I don't think it's about MLB. I think it's about just the mindset of a lot of the American pitchers. Look, there were a lot of MLB star pitchers. They just weren't on our team. Yu Darvish played, obviously, for Japan. Ohtani played for Japan. Alcantara played for Dominican. You had Urias playing for Mexico, but none of our top 10 starting pitchers were there. So I would that's my wish. It's a hit overall, but my wish is that we get some of the top starters there at the WBC. And maybe after watching it and seeing how exciting it was, maybe some of them will decide to go. I understand that there's an injury question and it's a big deal. It's a lot of money, but I'd love to see some of our top 10 pitchers pitching for Team USA.
Yeah, John, I wonder this. Do you think more of the U.S. pitchers would play if the tournament was exclusively held starting maybe now? Closer, where they're ramped up to 65, 75, 85 pitches, and they feel like they then just starting like a game for the season. I wonder if we should change the schedule a little and get it closer to the season. For my hit, I'm going to go, it's interesting to see how much Steve Cohen enjoys owning the Mets. Like, I think all Met fans have enjoyed him owning the Mets because of how much money he is putting into this. I think it's kind of interesting. He talked a lot about his growth as an owner. He's clearly a very bright guy who has the ability to do this. And it's kind of interesting. He really does seem to love doing this.
Yeah, I love the fact that he's out there and he's willing to do our podcast. Twice he's done it now. And he's willing to answer just about any question. I think the Alonso one was a little sensitive probably, but he answered basically every question and with good humor. And I certainly like the kibitzing and the rips on me. I enjoy that. Yeah. So I got to give him credit. He got me a few times, and let's extend an invitation to Hal Steinbrenner to do this as well. But
I've extended an invitation to Hal Steinbrenner.
Obviously, Steve Cohen's an unusual owner that's going to put in the time, take time out of the trading day. When it's a big day. I know he joked about how he had a lull in the trading day. It's a big day today. I saw CNBC with the interest rate, and he came out on our podcast. So I'm with you on that. That was a very good positive hit from you, Joel.
Yeah. And look, I'm sure that Steve Cohen will come up as a question for us next Tuesday, March 28th, when we have the Commissioner of Baseball, Rob Manfred, as a special guest live show from the Ainsworth in Midtown. That's 33 East 45th Street. Go to the nypost.com. You'll figure out how to get some tickets for that. It's 6 p.m. That's when we're beginning the Q&A, so you probably want to get there a little earlier than that. Thank you for listening to the show. It's a podcast from the New York Post. Thanks as always to Jake Brown and Andrew Hartz for producing the show and getting us through. Don't forget I'm going to say Wednesday. We're doing this on Wednesday this week, so it will be Thursday noon this week. This will drop on the Yes app. And don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating. That will keep the lights on here, hopefully, for a while, and we could have Steve Cohen as a guest for the 3rd time. And when we do this show next, we'll be a couple of days from opening day. So stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman.